All right, so I'm here to do a talk that I just did last week at Adobe Max. For y'all that don't know, Adobe Max is a big conference that happens every year that Adobe puts on. It's one of the largest gatherings of creative people on any event. This year was 7,000 designers and creative folks alike. It was a lot of fun. It's a 3-day event with a whole bunch of workshops and sessions. I did a session here on typography, and so that's what I'm going to share with you guys today. Before we begin, I'm just going to open up a quick little movie of one of the intros to the keynotes at Adobe Max. So check out the graphics on this. And these are the stages, so, a person's about that big. It's a huge stage. All right, I'm going to cap it at that. But it's pretty inspiring to be there, see all the designs, see the art happening, see the technology and the fusion of art. It's really cool. Close that out. All right, so today we're going to learn some best practices around typography. And the definition of typography is arranging type in order to make language more visible and easier to comprehend. So that's the art form of typography. Typography has a lot of rules in it. So today we're going to learn a lot of the rules. That way you can go out and break these rules. So the understanding of typography is learn the rules so you can break the rules. It's kind of a weird thing. Why is it important to know typography? It's really important in this day and age because we're in an information age. We're bombarded with content. And 90% of that content is a photo, a video with typography. So we look at typography every single day. And typography is used best when it's paired with visual communication. So before we begin, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. I actually built 2 sites for Adobe Max this year. I built one that was more of a celebratory site. This is called Sessions with Typography. Adobe came to me and gave me all of their premium typekit fonts and their whole access to pretty much everything they have, and told me the dream brief, which is do whatever the hell you want, come back in a month and show us what you got. So this was the celebration site to celebrate all the typefaces we now have available through Adobe on web. I'm going to go through this pretty quick because I also have an educational site. That's what we're going to spend the hour on. And the goal of that site is I want to teach you guys all the rules of typography, the fundamentals, and a little bit of tips. So that way when you leave this hour, you can feel pretty strong about breaking some rules in typography or at least identifying and understanding these rules. All right, so the first one is the celebration site. So let's just skim through this. This goes through some of the styles. We have theme, we have serif, we have sans serif, we have slab, and we have script. These are the styles of fonts that we have. Some hover effects here. You can click on to serif here. And we're just going to walk through. I'm going to do a deeper dive as we go to the next site into these different classifications and give you some of the rules here. But this is just to inspire you guys, show you some designs we've done. I never once sketched this site out. I just opened up Adobe Muse, played around with some things, and here's the outcome of that. I'm going to check out some slab serif here. These are some of the best practices around slab. And this was launched at 2015 for Adobe's product release this year to celebrate Typekit. You can check that out, some scroll effects. Boom! Who wants to build that for me? All right, cool. The last one is inspired by my chessboard here. But let's close that out and let's get into the realness. All right, so I built this website. This is also a website online. It's called Moments with Typography. You can access it anytime you want. So that was also the goal. Capture this all on a website that we can all go to and use as reference. So in the beginning of web design, web designers were limited to a select number of fonts to choose from. Fonts like Helvetica, Myriad, Arial, Georgia, and Verdana. These fonts were available for all. They were functionable, but they were limited to those select fonts. In the world of today, designers now have access to a huge and increasing font base for all types of digital platforms. And these fonts have the same benefits of those traditional web fonts, allowing more capability for us to choose multiple fonts and pair fonts. I'm going to give you a little run through of what we're going to spend the next 45 minutes going through. I'm also going to have a session at the end for Q&A, so if you have questions, just wait till the end, I'll get to it. But first, we're going to dive into some of the distinctions between serif, sans serif, and some of the other fonts. Then we're going to go into the sizes. I've laid out some best practices for using paragraph sizes, H1 sizes, H2, H3, and so forth on desktop, tablet, and mobile devices. So a little bit of best practices or a subset, if you say, of a foundation to work from. But again, this is just the best practice. You can break the rules there. We're going to dive into some spacing, some responsive grid making, spacing out your mobile, and leading and spacing as an attribute. Next, we'll tackle some kerning. We'll go through tracking, some visual space techniques that I was taught in college, and some tips. We're going to look at best practices around pairing a font. We may skip some plugins. We'll come back to it if we have time. This was more Muse specific. The script, which is a font type, we're going to look at the best practices there. We have the sans serif, we have the serifs, we have the slab, and we have some rules and best practices. So I have a lot of content. I'm going to maybe skip a few things. That way we can get to the real source of this. All right, so let's start with the distinctions and the classification of fonts. So in the world of serif, we have 3 classifications at a high level. I'm not going to go further into details, but you can go into much more definition here. But at a high level, all we all need to know is that there's an old style, there's a transitional, and there's a modern. And I'm going to dive into each one. So all you really need to know about for the old style here is the serif. It has a curved edge on it. So you can see the serif here is curved right on that L. That's the distinction for old style serif fonts. That's all you really need to know. I've also laid out some of the best practices of font, or some of the best fonts for that category, like Adobe Jensen, Garamond, and Bembo. Transitional serifs were actually the word transition means in between the transition from modern and old style, and exactly that. So what it is about a transitional font is that it has a sharper serif and it's more flat. So you can see they flatten it out, or it's no longer has a curve to it except on the R, and it's a little bit more sharp of an edge. Fonts included there are Baskerville, Georgia, Mrs. Eves. The modern font, you can see now they've straightened out the serifs and they've shortened them down to be flat. So that no longer do they have thick curves to thins. They're very much flat and straight. Ones that include there are Bodoni, Bernard did it. Next we have Egyptian, which is also known as slab. These were used for headline fonts for advertising. Back in the day when these were first introduced, there were newspaper ads being printed, a lot of content. So they needed something that could really jump and grab the user's attention. So that's where these big, fat, slab serifs came from. And I don't need to break that out too much. All right, let's go into the sans serifs. So in popularity, in print, serif fonts are the best to read. If you're going to lay out a long novel in a print book, you're going to use a serif font. In web, we're finding long reads do better on web, not the Kindle, with actual sans serifs. And why is that? Because serif fonts, when they load on web, have trouble with pixels. So when they're real small, the pixel loads those serifs, and they're not sharp. causes legibility issues. So here in the world of sans serif, it's best practice to use these for long reads on the web. Retina will fix that. Retina one day will take us back to the serif fonts. But all you need to know about the Humanist font is that if you're going to choose a most legible sans serif font, it's within the Humanist category. So those are the fonts you should choose from: Frutiger, Jill Sans. Don't use Optima. Optima was created because if you have a client who doesn't like sans serif and doesn't like serif, you give them Optima. It was the only reason Optima was created. All right, Grotesque. These are popular fonts. Helvetica is one of them. They're popular for the bowl of the G. You can see here, little bowl there. And it's also a popular bowl in the A, in the lowercase Helvetica A. Next up, we have the geometric fonts like Futura. The distinction here is that they're made with perfect geometric, like the circle here is a perfect geometric font. So they're laid out in a structure that's perfectly geometric. The Avant-Garde is one that's a classification of geometric, but it doesn't actually have a perfect circle. It's a little bit off, but most of them should have a perfect circle, and that's what you'll use to identify these geometric fonts. The other ones we have are calligraphic, which was the scribes back in the day, and the black letter. We also have the Pixel, which came out of Immigré in the late 90s out of Berkeley. They made a lot of great fonts there. And then we have Theme. So that wraps up just the quick little history lesson of the different types of fonts that we have. And let's go into sizes now. All right, so the goal of your sizes here is that I've laid out a systematic approach. We all work with engineers here. It's best to lay out your design in a systematic way. Don't just design every page with a different typeface, with a different size. Start at some point to capture these elements and make a system out of it. So here I've laid out a system of what we're going to start with the paragraphs and go to the H1s, the H2s, and the H3s. But I've also laid out what are the best practices for sizes, line height, and character count on these different devices that we have. So for a paragraph size, we're looking at a pretty good size to be 16 points or 16 pixel height for desktop and tablet. Our line height is going to be 1.3, and for desktop and tablet, our character count, meaning our paragraph length, should be around 65 to 68 is a good count. Now, when we go to mobile, we're going to switch a little bit. Our line height is going to tighten up a little bit. We're still going to be at 16, but our character count ideally is going to be around 35 to 38. So that's ideal for what you want in mobile versus desktop. Why is this all important? As we design more and more responsive, it's better to know these rules of when things scale or type scales to have a good system of what is the most legible and readable font on these different platforms. So at H1 for desktop, we have 48, we have 40 for the tablet, and 32 for the iPhone or the mobile device. Different line heights there. For our H2, we have a 36 text size, and we have a 32 for our tablet and 26 for our mobile, and we have different line heights there. For our H3, we have a 18-point size for our desktop, 16 for our tablet, and 16 for our mobile. And this is a site I built for everybody to come to this, right? So you guys know this stuff, but it's also a tool that you can come back to and visit or send people to this website if they need, if they're learning this stuff. I've summarized it in these ones. So in a desktop format, you can get away with 13 to 16 points for your paragraph. Again, always go with visual. Just go with what looks good, right? Like these are just foundations to use, but if it doesn't look right, change it up. Next one, we're going to have the headline size at 18 to 26. You got your line heights to 1.3 to 1.8. Those are also EMs in CSS. Your heading size, which is a little bit larger than your headline size, at 26 to 34. I usually set up my widths at work at 1024. There's a lot of interesting conversations about the best width for mobile or for desktop. Some say it's 1330. Has anybody heard that before? 1330? I just heard that this week and was like, wow, that's crazy. I do mine at 1024. On my own terms, when I'm not at work, I'll do 1200. But that's just, on my own, because I'll deal with those issues. So safe bet is 960 or 1024. Tablet, you got 13 to 16. You got for your paragraph size, you got 18 to 24. For your headline size and your heading size, you can get away with 26 to 34. Again, different pixel dimensions here. Different when I taught this at Max, because a lot of people don't know this stuff, but I know that we do. If you're going to design for the iPhone 6, don't make your design file this pixel. Double it. Double that size, so when you slice out assets, you do a 2x. That's at the size at double those pixel dimensions there. And a 1x is going to be your normal size. One day we'll just go SVG, iOS, please, and we won't have that issue anymore. Android, you just give them SVGs and you're good. All right, so phone, you have 14 to 16 on your paragraph size, 18 to 22. Your line heights are a little bit more short, and your heading size is 24 to 32. Cool. In the sake of time, I'm going to keep going. All right, so let's move on to responsive. Some of you guys may have saw this on my last talk. I include this link. But there's a lot of difficulties in working with responsive grid making, and what's the best practice there. So I've simplified it down by a 3-column grid. I'm going to switch over to this side. So you have a 3-column grid. All you need to do is make the first column. Don't think pixels, just think layout, not pixel perfection here. Each column is the width of a mobile device. When you get up to 3, you have your full desktop. When you get your tablet, you have landscape at 3. When you get to portrait, one of the boxes will scoot down or some text. And when you get to mobile, all 3 will stack, and your text will go down. It's a first easy way to think about like card systems in responsive. That's a cheat. You don't actually want to design that way, but it's a first idea to get a picture of how this actually works. The hard part in responsive is defining the behavior in between these breakpoints, right? But again, only designers and engineers grab the browser and shrink it to see that behavior, right? Like people using this doesn't do that, so that's just something to think about there. All right, so here's the site. Let me close this out so I can show you. All right, so here's an example of that, right? So they have what looks like a 3-column grid. And as I shrink it down, it's going to hit different breakpoints all the way into my tab or my mobile device, which didn't really work so well. That's okay. All right, so let's keep this show going. All right, next up, for the designers, if you're doing a mobile layout, you can just use Zeppelin right now, which is a plugin that hooks into Sketch that will break out all these pixels. But back in the day, this is how we broke down pixel spacing in a mobile mock. We made little rectangles, each one representing 10 pixels, and we just laid over our mocks and give that to engineers. Next thing up, it's really important to be consistent with your spacing. Everything that you design has an attribute to it. So spacing has an attribute too. And if you go a systematic approach with your spacing, it's all about consistency, right? So here I have a 10-pixel leading for the space in between my paragraph sentences. I'm going to times that by 4. I'm going to get a 40 for my headline and my space between my paragraph. And I'm going to times the 40 by 2 and double it for the spacing in between my paragraph. Why is it important to do this? It's important with engineers to give this system to them so they can use it as well. It's also important when you're making decisions from a client, right? So the rule in design is we should have reasons and logic behind our design decisions. And that includes spacing too, right? So you probably won't get questioned on spacing, but it's good to have reason and logic between everything. All right, next up I want to show you guys a style guide. Who's heard of component-driven design? Raise your hand. All right, great. I thought everybody would, so this is good. Cool, here's a style guide that I made. This breaks down a lot of the colors. You see, here's your H1s, your H2s, along with examples of what those fonts look like and where they're at in the site. This is sort of the recipe of the application that designers typically do with engineers to help break down all the little pieces that make up this site. So there's all your buttons, there's your forms, there's your check boxes. But here's what I really want to focus on. I want to focus on the component-driven element. Some of the guys in Palo Alto, yep, raise your hand. Yep, Todd right there. Todd, yep. Chris and Nicole Sullivan. So yeah, this was a little bit of a pain in the ass to get at the beginning, right? I was like, oh God, I got to work this way. But now that I've worked this way, it's really helpful, and I'd recommend it for everybody. So first thing is to think about everything as a component, right? So I have my spacing is increments of 15. So I have 15 pixels as a component. Here's the first stab of one of my design pieces, is I have a card. I just have a blank card. So I'm going to call that a component called blank card. And off to the right now, I have a blank card with an icon on it. So now that's blank card with icon combo. I'm also specifying the type and the spacing to make this design. Now here's where it really comes together. You can see now I have a card header here. This is at 60 pixels tall. I have a corner button. That's also another component. And when I combine those, I have a card header with a corner button. Now I'm going to combine my card that I just made at the top with my header, so you can see that. That's called blank card with card header. And now I have my blank card with header with corner button. So you can see those three components there. You don't start this way. Start doing your design and then stop and start to put this into a system. Eventually, you want to close the lid, right? So as you're designing new pages, you want to pull from these existing components and not reintroduce new components to the workflow. You can see more down here. I won't get into it, but it's really helpful to break this down and reutilize these same components for different scenarios, different workflows, and different use cases in the application. All right, cool. So let's keep going. All right, tracking. My font didn't load, but all you need to know about the difference between tracking and kerning is tracking is going to give equal spacing between each letter, and kerning is actually going to give different spaces in between each letter that are defined by the typographer or whoever's setting the type. So you can see different spacing in between each letter. Now here's the fun one. So I was taught this in my calligraphy school, or calligraphy class at the Academy of Art by a guy named Claude, who was like the most, this guy was the grumpiest man you've ever met, but he was really good at calligraphy. So the rule of thumb is, and there's some limitations here, I'll point them out. Where's Lenny at? Is Lenny here? Great. Okay, great. Cool, because he's going to call bullshit on some of this. So here's the deal. You get about a quarter cup of water. You get the same amount of water, and that same amount of water should fill up each space visually. Here's the key. Visually up to the X height in between each letter. So you only get that same amount of water to fill up each letter in the space. So what it is you're looking at it more as a visual treatment than a real calculated approach. This works for most letters, but it doesn't work for some awkward letter pairs, and that's like capital L, capital A, double O, the capital L, the lowercase y, the lowercase v, in like Wyoming, the capital W and the capital Y. Those are very awkward letter pairs. And Lenny coined this one, the E and the O, the lowercase e and the O. So again, it's a tool you can use, but it won't work for those awkward letter pairs. All right, so kerning tips. You can kern upside down. I don't know why you would. I'd never done it. It's a tip. What it's really alluding to is when you're drawing, if you can't draw a horse, turn the horse upside down. Draw it upside down, because it will force you to look at the shapes and not the horse. So that's the theory behind that. Here's the one you really need to know, and I was doing this for years and didn't even realize I was doing it. Kern in threes, right? So don't kern the whole word. Start with the first three letters. So do the K, the E, and the R, and then go through, do the R, the N, and the N and the I. Then do the I and the N and the G, and eventually you'll get to a nice kerned word there. The next thing is when you scale, right? So anytime you scale a logo type or a text font or anything, you have to kern. Don't just because you scale it doesn't mean that you don't have to rekern it. So that's really important there. Sometimes if you're limited in real estate, like you have a little profile at the top and you only have a little bar to put text on it, you can get away with all caps at 10 pixels tall. Be wary, it's easy to overdo this and make things screaming at you, but if you need a way to like fit some text in a really small area, you can use that, but just make sure that you use a lot of kerning in there, right? Give it good letter space. If it doesn't have good letter space, it'll look like crap. Here's a big one. If you're working in print and you're doing a big old sign on a billboard, you have to print it and tile it to check the kerning on it. Don't print it. Don't think it's good on your monitor. It's going to look good on the billboard, right? You got to print it and check it out. Next up from there is don't zoom too far in when you're kerning type, or else you're kern it too tight. And it's also important that you zoom in and out as you kern. So zoom out, see how it looks from afar. Zoom in to see it. Has anybody ever seen this type method game? This is pretty cool. So if you drag this E, this is the best way to practice kerning. There's a website right now called typemethod.io, and this is how you can practice your kerning, right? So let's see. I'm going to move these over here. V needs to go over a little bit to the left. Let's see. 61. There you go. All right, great. Oh, I could do better. It's okay. If you can do 61 when you're in front of a crowd, you could do like 95 easily. All right, so let's go into the pair. So there's really no guidelines for pairing fonts. The real key is don't ever use more than 3 typefaces in a design. And ideally 2. You can get away with so much typefaces if you have 2 solid good typefaces. That's all you need. The other thing is pairing is like marriage, right? Opposites attract. So you want good contrast, you want harmony, and you want to match the mood. Don't do like a little kid's birthday party mood for a corporate event flyer or like an annual report, right? So you want to mix the mood of the pair as well. And again, users got 8 seconds they have an 8-second attention span on web to identify and understand everything that you're presenting to them. So they got 8 seconds. That's type 2. So your pairing and your type shouldn't conflict on that 8-second parameter. There's a tool that we use called, that we measure these. It's called read measurement and hierarchy measurement. Read measurement is how fast and how easy is it for somebody to read a sentence and come back to the next sentence and read that sentence. And then we also have the hierarchy measurement. How easy and how fast can somebody comprehend all the components on your page? So that 8-second, I have 8 seconds to tell this user everything that's going on. That's what I mean by the hierarchy measurement, right? Like nothing should conflict in that. I think that was everything I wanted to get through. All right, cool. So here goes some examples. We have source serif with Mosaic sans. You can see the example here. And again, it's good to pay attention to scale and proportion. Pay attention to priority and emphasis. Again, you're going for harmony and contrast all at the same point without trying too hard. You can tell when you try too hard on these things. Keep body text readable. That's a known. Unify fonts using color or use color as contrast, right? So if you want to make contrast, you can use color. Avoid anything too similar. Another from the Google shop, Droid Serif and Proxima Nova is a paired font. So again, we're looking for good contrast, right? We want a nice sans serif with a big slab serif, not a light sans with a serif that lacks contrast, right? So there's something there you need to do to make contrast there on the right. You can choose criteria by similar X height. So you can see the one on the left has similar X height, meaning the lowercase letters there are the same height. And the one on the right has much more space on the bottom one than the one on the top. Another criteria you can use is similar cap height. So that's the capital has the same horizontal space or vertical space. You can see that's a good one. And the one on the right has a lot of shifting there. You can use the same creator. Freight sans, Freight text, those are by the same creator. Stone serif and Museo sans are by the same creator. A really good one is Futura and Bodoni for fashion. I love these pair in an editorial version. So if you're ever doing a fashion design, use Futura light, thin, and then do a big, bold Bodoni on it, and it will look good. Here's some recommendations. I won't go through all of these because the sake of time. You guys have this website. If anybody's interested, you can go back to these and have these recommendations here. I'm going to skip the plugins till we come back to that. All right, so I went into Typekit. Adobe has like a million fonts going on, and I know my typography pretty well. All the labelings that they've created these fonts and the font names are just out of this world. I've never heard of any font names like Sophia and Rogue and Cell. So what I did was I pulled out some of the fonts that have the most tasteful fonts, the ones that look good, the ones that aren't crappy, and I've showcased them here. So in Typekit, if you ever need a good script, just go to this font, go to this page on the script file, and find a good script that you like, and it's the same font in Typekit. All right, so you guys may start to get hungry even after you've already ate, because this is all about food. What I really want to just get into real quick are the do's and the don'ts. So with script, you want to do one font at a time. You want to use it for elegant layouts and invites. You want it for very short paragraphs. If you do use a short paragraph, make sure you give it good leading. Dress it up with like little elements. It's always tasteful. Well-spaced leading and legibility over flair. What you don't want to use the script for is for long paragraphs. You don't want to do all caps. You don't want tight kerning, and you don't want multiple script fonts all over the place. Here's some examples of script that I've put together. You can also use a carousel and replace the images with text. All right, let's move into sans. Again, some fonts you've heard of, Source Sans, Museo Sans. Other fonts, you have no idea where they came from, but they're not bad. So if you need to go through Typekit and you're not sure what are good sans serif fonts, there's a list for you. All right, so the things you want to use sans serif font for is you want to use it for a short read. You want to use it for headlines. You want to pair it with non-sans fonts, so you pair it with a serif, pair it with a slab. You want to use it for logo types, for modern logo types. You want to kern it when it's small. It's good for web, so use a sans serif font for long web reads. And you can get away with it using it condensed and also small all caps with kerning. So you don't want to use all caps in serif because serif's all caps look like crap. So again, you don't want to use this for long reads. You don't want to pair it with another sans serif. You don't want to use it for that shouldn't be in there. You do want to use it for very short paragraphs. And lowercase with lots of kerning. You don't want to do that. Here goes some examples of that. And this has some scroll effects to it. If I scroll up, it should fly away. Just for fun. All right, let's go into serif. Again, went through Typekit, pulled out a bunch of serifs. They actually did have Garamond. I was surprised. Droid serif, Bodoni. A lot more of the actual popular fonts were in Typekit on the serif side. They had Baskerville. All right, for serifs, some do's and don'ts. You want to use them for long reads in print. Be careful a little bit in web. Retina will fix that, but for right now, seems that sans serif fonts do really well for long reads on web. Used for classic designs, good for editorial and printing, and pair it with a sans or a script or a slab. What you don't want to use a sans serif is to pair with another serif. You don't want to use it in all caps, or you want to be careful with all caps. And you don't want to use all caps with lots of kerning. Like I showed on the last slide, we had that all cap paragraph for the sans serif. You don't want to do that with serif fonts. Got some examples here. Who knows what this is called? What was that? Heard it? Ligature. The engineer, the designer's in the room. What? All right, cool. So let's keep going here. Let's go into slab. For some reason, I love using slab for like fruit or animals or anything like that. Like use a slab if you're doing a monkey poster. All right, so some do's and don'ts with slab. Used for headlines, a great headline font. Used for fun or masculine designs. Slab usually tends to have a masculine feel to it. Good for editorial and printing. Pairs well with other sans. Good kerning due to a large serif, so if you do use a slab, put some good kerning in it. All caps with extra kerning. Use in thin light for fashion, so the little light, small slabs are nice. Use bold for masculine, and use for brochures, posters, and advertising. What you don't want to use a slab serif font is for long reads. You want to be a little careful for all caps, and you want to be careful when pairing that with the serif. Remember that slab's also considered part of the serif family, so when you pair it with another serif, you're kind of breaking the rules there, but you just have to be careful with it. It's not a definite rule. Oh, I forgot to show you examples. So life's pretty much about that. You know, it's eating good food, it's finding good friends, it's going and traveling places and experiencing with all of that together. Here's an owl. It has some scroll effects on the eyes there. Wait, you weren't supposed to see that yet. All right, here's the real fun stuff here, which we'll go through. These are all the rules. All right, so don't use system fonts. Web designers in the past have spent years getting away from using system fonts for that their client wanted to use a specific font. It didn't work in web, so they had to load it as a system font. If we're still doing that, they're going to get pissed, so don't do it anymore. Don't switch fonts on a hover state. I've only seen this once, but God, was it horrid, so don't do it. Also be careful when you switch bold, too, because bold can make shifts in the padding and make things a little bumpy. Don't pair fonts with the same font classes, right? So again, break some rules, but the general rule is don't pair a serif with another serif. You want that contrast. It's like marriage. Don't use too many typefaces, so use 3, ideally use 2. And again, a typeface and a font, right? A typeface, what a typeface is a series of fonts within a family, right? And a font is just one font, so I just want to be clear on what that is. Use all caps sparingly. I've done this a few times. It's easy to get crazy and the things yelling at you. Watch out for widows and rivers. Who knows what those are? Raise your hand. Great, because the next slide I'm going to go through those. Perfect. Don't use web fonts for iOS applications. This was a few years ago. I had some trouble on an iOS application when I gave them a web font. Engineers in the room, is that still the case? No problems there? Like a WOOF format? Yeah. They don't work? Cool, there you go. So on the web, use TT, OTF, or WOOF font formats for web. There's still some issues on OTF there. Watch out when using blue for text that's not a link, right? That's important. So if your brand has blue in it and you want to use blue for your headlines, on a mobile device, some people are going to tap on it thinking that it's a link. They may even click on it in the web. In theory, just don't use drop shadows on text. You can break that, but not supposed to. Studies are showing that sans serif fonts generally do better for web reads. Again, on web, and print, no more than 65 character for your paragraph text. You can get away with 68. No more than 35 characters for your paragraph text. You get away with 38 there. Studies are actually saying 75 for web read is becoming more common. Use hanging quotes. If you guys don't know what that is, the next slide, I'll show you that. That just means don't be lazy. That's all that means. Do not be lazy. Use size, weight, color, contrast, and position for hierarchy, right? You don't need to do crazy, awful fonts. Like you can do a line, you can do boldness. Don't use crazy theme fonts. Example, that Halloween theme font we always see. It's fun, but don't use it. Never distort your font from its natural form. Careful when using gradients for the color of the font. I don't know why you would do that. Avoid justified paragraph text unless you really can figure out a good justified paragraph text takes a lot of time, and I appreciate anybody who can do it well. So general rule of thumb, just stay away from full justified paragraph text. Be careful when using small text for web. Add good letter spacing if you do. Use good contrast and legibility. Give good white space and don't clutter typographic content. Speak to your user as your, not mine, right? So this is your account, not my account. Writing should focus on what the user can do with the application, not what the application can do for the user. Use we to represent the system. It's more personable and human. Write in the present, not the past tense. For UI, use numbers and sentences over words. You can break that too. Sans serif with gray colored text works better for digital long reads. Here's the thing. If you're doing a long read, don't lay out your text in black. Lay out your paragraph text in some sort of grayish black, right? It can be just as dark as black, but just put some color into that black. Don't use pure black. And here's the thing, too, is mobile screens get glare when you pull them out in the sun and make gray text hard to read, too. So as you're doing paragraph text, it's important for you to know, then you should go test that out in the sun. Also, left justified layouts will set you up better in the long run. So if you're starting to do a very vertical centered design, you're going to cause problems way down the road. And left justified will actually solve some things for you. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go try it, and then you'll know later on that center justified usually will cause some problems, unless you're doing like a one-page marketing site, right? Like a long scrolly page. All right, some do's and don'ts. I'll actually give you examples there. So paragraph rags. Watch out for holes. Watch out for just really bad rags on the right. You can see that. On the left is a little bit better. Also on the right, there's not only a problem with the rag on this paragraph, there's also another problem in this paragraph. Who wants to point it out? Where's my designers in the room? All right. Ofri. An orphan, a widow. Yeah. So that little thing shouldn't be there. Or you should add some friends to that guy. Okay, here it is. Emphasis with italic. This is my personal biased opinion. You should never use italic. Never, ever. Unless you're doing some cool poster with the italic font. This is probably the only case you should use italic, is if you want to create emphasis without disturbing the user in their read, right? So I want to create emphasis on this blue bottle Thundercats here. I'm going to use italic. What I don't want to do is the one on the right, right? I've broken that user's read. It's real bold, that stands out. I just want a nice little emphasis in my paragraph. That's when you should use italics, or for disclaimers. Other than that, it's my bias to stay away from them. Also, if you need lower ipsum, just go to hipsteripsum.com. Has great lower ipsum. All right, so orphans. You can see here that on a two-column paragraph, it's a very nice, ideally it would be nice to have 3 lines of text here, but you want at least 2 and at least 3 on the right for your paragraph, and I'll show you what that means when you do it wrong. Right? What you don't want is like 1 up here or 1 down there and a whole bunch of text on the right. Horizontal alignment, you can see the green, things are lining up. What you don't want to do here is on the red, where things are all busted and not lined up. All right, first line measurement. On your paragraph text, your first line should never be the longest line, right? It should always be somewhat in the middle. You can see on the right here I have my longest line. All right, hanging quotes. Remember I said this? This is about being lazy. That's lazy. See, this breaks your vertical format here, where this I still have the nice left justified edge. Doesn't break my eye. I think this is one of the last ones. So leading here, we have some good leading on the left. Nice leading. I've added a little bit of space there on the bottom paragraph. And then on the right, you can see a little bit too tight and a little too much leading here. Again, these are rules. You can break them. There's multiple ways to do this and break them in a nice way. paragraph length. We want about 65, 68. I think this is 62 or 59 or something. That's too long. It's too long of a read. And this is too short. Hence, there's rules here you can break. In tracking the equal spacing between letters, you have here on the left a good amount of tracking, and you have on the right just way too much tracking over there. All right, I guess that will kick into some Q&A. Does anybody want to go back to?
Like a lot of those things you can control the styling, but a lot of those recommendations are moving the content, the actual words of the text, and to obey all of those rules, they have to have reserves and everything. How do you reconcile that with the actual copywriting of the project?
Oh yeah, so I think what Rob was asking is how do you reconcile sort of a systematic approach versus you don't know what your copy you're going to get from your copywriter? Was that the question? There's a thing called aesthetics versus content, right? So if you have a copywriter and you should be working really close with them, and I've had these situations in the past come about where I've had my aesthetics I was hoping for a good look in my 2-column aesthetics, and based off the copy that I was given, it wasn't a good aesthetics, right? It was breaking in some points. Some paragraph lines were too long, causing bad rags. So what I do is I work with my copywriter. I show them, hey, I'm having bad rags here because of this sentence. Can we shorten this word? Can we add some copy here? So the balance in the give or take is time, and the thing we're balancing is aesthetics versus content, right? Like I want a really good flow of aesthetics, but I also want the right content. So it's kind of give or take there on those two things. When you're in college, when you're using Lorem Ipsum, you go whatever you want, right? Like you need an extra paragraph, write an extra paragraph. But in the real world, that's content you're given, and sometimes you don't have that liberty, so you have to work with what you have. There in back.
Do you have any advice for emails with regard to emails and character width and things like that for more readability? So make sure people read your emails and things like that.
I'd say probably just go online. I'm sure there's some standard in emails. I probably would say not to go off some of these rules for email. You'd want a paragraph text, but email may have a different subset there.
Into your typographic system.
What was that?
I have monospaced fonts fit into your typographic.
Monospaced fonts. How do monospaced fonts fit into my typographic?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm using them a lot when we're doing web pages and technical content. We use monospaced fonts for like code.
I wish I could answer that. Maybe check me after I can regular font.
You mentioned gray text and how it's hard to read on mobile. You didn't mention like contrast and like white text on dark background or dark text on light background. And David Ogilvy said if it was easy to read white text on a dark background, if this would be white text on black, and they're not. So I'm wondering what your opinion is about it.
I'll go based off the type rule, right? So if you're going to use black text on white, you're okay on the kerning. Do your own kerning on it. If you're going to reverse it, right? So I'm going to have white text on a black background. I'm going to want extra kerning on that. It's a print thing, and I'm still unsure how that translates in the future of web and technical. But why you wanted more kerning was when you're printing, you actually have a black, and you're putting color on color. So it's important to have the space in between there, or else the color will bleed into the next line. Was a print thing, but yeah, unsure of how that's going to go forward. What's that? So white color or white paper with darker text is always best for readability. If you go reverse that, you're going to have legibility issues. So the rule is like don't lay out a novel, on 100 pages of black cover colored pages with white text. You want white colored paper with black text. Barnes?
It's okay. We'll come back to you. Jessica, back.
I know how many fonts I should use, like the Macs do, but how many font weights in the same font can I use?
How many font weights in the same font is okay for you to use? So you have a font family, say Proxima Nova. Proxima Nova has as many of those font classifications as you need. You can use as much as you want, as long as they're in Proxima Nova. Some of the cases are like, I have a regular, I have a bold, and I have a semi-bold. You can ask yourself, is that semi-bold necessary for your design, right? Do you need a secondary level of hierarchy between regular and bold? But if you don't need that, then just use the bold and the regular. Barnes.
Talk about how the rules, to break the rules. A question about tweaking a particular piece of your website just because you think it looks a little bit better. So in general, my buttons are spaced this way, this far apart from other things. But on this page, I really want this like 3 pixels in because of some look. And how much should these little one-off tweaks for a particular component, how much should they be allowed in a website? Like, what are the pros and cons?
It's a good question. So Barnes is asking, what's the how much leverage should somebody have to create custom design if we already have a system in place? Is that right? I'm a fan of the most important thing of this is the experience, right, for the customer or for a user. Whatever that experience is going to be, even if it means new designs for everything, is, I think, necessary for that experience. But that's not the goal we want to hit, right? So we want to have a systematic approach. But if that does come about where, I need to make something custom, that I need to open up the lid now and do something new, just make sure you grab an existing component, and when you change it, you're recording your process of what you've changed. So you've said, hey, I picked up that font, I've changed it to an H1 with this component, and call it a new component. So that way you guys can reutilize that again, right? So if that is the case, you want to, balance between best for the customer, best for the experience, versus hey, the efficiency of our workflow should be really judged on the client's behalf, right? Like, is it 80% engineering work for 20% change? Not a big fan of that. Is it a 20% engineering work for an 80% great thing to add to the design? I'm a fan of that, right? So those are things you can talk about with the design. But there will never be a case where you will never need to do it as something new, right? Like, there will always be a case where something new will come up. But just capture it, put it as a new component, and keep going.
Is there a mobile app out there that breaks the rules and you appreciate it?
Oh, there's tons of good stuff out there that makes simple as well.
I don't have any themes I could show you guys, but yeah, just go look. You'll know when you see it. You'll know in 2 seconds it's good. One thing I wanted to add here are these resources. Type Genius is if you need to find a font pair and you don't know where to go. This will give you the best font pairs for a particular font. And I just want to add that before I go. Thank you.